Welcome to Game of Crypto Thrones, a global debate in crypto regulations that took place on April 23rd, 2024. With our esteemed panelists, we delved into several exciting topics. We explored how various laws and regulations impact the world of crypto assets from a practical perspective, discussed whether investor trends have shifted since the crypto market became regulated, and examined the impact of MiCA on the global market. Join our conversation to explore how experts perceive the current state of affairs and their expectations for the future. Now, without further ado, let us introduce our esteemed panelists. Erik Westerlund, the COO at Qubit BTCX. Qubit is Sweden's leading Bitcoin company in financial services and education, known for developing IT solutions in the digital asset industry, primarily serving the Swedish and European market. Their most well-known brands are BTCX, Bitcoin Exchange, and Qubit EML Desk. Jeff Randlatt, CFA at Cryptio. Cryptio is a US-based leading enterprise-grade crypto subledger which runs a proprietary blockchain data infrastructure that produces accurate and auditable reporting. Milivoje Bautista, CEO, CTO at OneGate. OneGate is a Swiss data privacy and distributed ledger technology innovator offering a wide range of solutions for communication, social media, and business IT. George Sebastião, co-founder and executive director of the global blockchain organization. With a mission to empower industry stakeholders, the global blockchain organization champions collaboration among leaders, paving the way for enhanced understanding and streamlined adoption of blockchain technologies worldwide. The event is moderated by our CEO, Carola Senior-Kasai.
Let's get back to you, Jeff, from the US.
Thanks for having me, Carola. I'm Jeff Runlet, the head of accounting strategy at Cryptio. And Cryptio is a global company that supports around, right now, 400 companies in the digital asset space, and most of which are regulated. And we help them complete their accounting and compliance reporting through our SaaS solution. Now, I'm in the US, but as the head of strategy, I support all of our companies globally, so I'm deeply involved in following MiCA and really all global regulations, just so I could help them, assist them, and help build our product to help automate. And we're going to talk about MiCA here in length, so I'm not going to go into that. It's obvious that they're really supporting the move forward. I'll give a quick quote from the EU Commissioner, the EVP. He said, this is Vladis Dombrovskis. He said, as several people have said before me, the future is digital. I could not agree more. Embracing digitalization is a priority that we identified as a major source of potential growth. So, it shows the real support that the EU has for digital assets. And that brings me to the US, where, my feeling is a lot different here in the US, where I think everyone would agree. And it's really the lack of regulation that we see here. It's more of regulation by enforcement. Companies appear to be under attack one by one. You have companies like Ripple coming out on top, but only after $200 million, in legal fees. And they're following rules set in place close to something like 70 years ago, to be honest, which is quite bizarre. And I would say a lot of companies really aren't running into the U.S. to do business, but more concerned and wondering, like you said, Carola, where should we go? Where should we have a backup plan? But I'm also a member of the Chamber of Digital Commerce, which helps influence Washington, D.C. and just making the right choices for this industry. So, personally, I think MiCA is great. I think what they're doing is going to be a really positive impact on the entire industry, and looking forward to just following it along.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And indeed, that we can also see it in our practice that we basically get requests from crypto companies on a weekly basis to do regulatory landscape analysis or MiCA evaluations, or to actually move their operations to another country. And it's very clear that one of the effects of MiCA is that both within the EU and globally, a strong forum shows shopping has begun. And I'm sure that in the audience, there are some of you as well who are contemplating moving your companies. So you guys, you all have very significant experiences in the crypto space and in running crypto businesses. So when you consider your own business, how would you describe the legal environment in the country? Like Jeff already started to explain the US one now. And how does the existing or non-existing regulatory framework affect your work from a practical perspective? Let's start then with let's go from EU and then zoom out. So Eric, you're sitting
Yes.
right in the middle of the MiCA transition.
Exactly. So I'm going to start a little bit with the Swedish perspective because, as you know, the regulatory landscape within Europe has been very diverse since like the past decade or so. But in Sweden, like we're registered at our financial authority here, and we are regulated basically as the Forex you see at the airport. So it's not very like we fall under the EU AML laws, but there are no specific crypto regulatory framework. And like generally, the development the past 10 or 12 years has been a bit different. Like when my CEO and founder sent an email to the Financial Authority in 2012 asking if we should be regulated or not, they said no, and they thought he was selling computer game money or whatever. But now with MiCA, like we're very excited for it to get the clarity and to be able to go out in Europe. But on the other side of that is that all exchanges or crypto asset service providers are thinking the same thing. So the competitive dynamics will of course increase. But generally we are positive.
Thank you. And how is the case in Dubai? We can't hear you at the moment, but then we can get to Switzerland until.
Carla, I could jump in here. Now I
Okay.
can talk also about like the French laws in place. They have something called PACT laws, which already are doing some things MiCA has. So I think bringing MiCA in will make it more robust and just add more consistencies and more of a level playing field where everyone has to abide by these laws. So I think it'll help France be a bit more competitive for those regions in the EU that aren't seeing these type of regulations already, because increased compliance is going to bring increased cost. A lot of the smaller companies might be more challenged by increased regulations, because as I see it, regulations are kind of like a double-edged sword. They're great for the industry, but they're also stifling in like new innovation where the young guys, they have to save every penny they have. Now they have to spend it on some increased regulation costs. So it'll make a level playing field, but it could stifle some innovation in some regions where there's not these costs to bring up your business.
And can you give us some practical examples which you encountered because of the fragmented legal background in the US?
In the US,
when running your business there.
Yeah, I mean we're headquartered out of the US. I would say that I would say it's more companies just being scared to do things in the US. They don't want to be. The quote is they don't want to be first to market. They want to be fast to market. So you see a lot of people sitting on the sidelines in the U.S., specifically finance companies. You see a few operating, but it's likely those that have very close regulation ties, and they know the tightrope they could walk. Others, they don't even want to put their foot in the water yet, because they know that it just brings a microscope to them, and it could just be increased cost, fees, fines, and scrutiny that they don't want to see right now. So I would say in the U.S., it's a lot of not being first to market, but fast to market. So once the regulations open up, they have teams in place ready to go, but they're not really doing much yet.
And what would you say, guys, that what are the strengths of the legal framework in the country, and whether anytime Switzerland and Dubai is Mike working, just feel free to jump in.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, Mike did.
In the Middle East, actually, there's several countries that have done some very positive ways of moving forward. One of the first ones that take the first movers was actually the Kingdom of Bahrain, that moved with what it was called the regulatory sandbox that was done by the Central Bank of Bahrain. Bahrain has been a center for banking, both traditional and Islamic banking. So they were one of the first ones to adopt digital assets. From there, I think there was a good evolution, both from UAE as a country and from two elements of UAE, which is both Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Dubai was sealed with VARA, which is the Asset Regulatory Authority, that enabled the regulation of these digital assets. There was also a DAO that was set up in Ras Al Khaimah, which is another emirate, and we have some regulatories that got passed within Abu Dhabi and the UAE through the ADGM authority. All of these operate in tandem to introduce the acceptance of these new approaches towards digital assets. So the progress so far has been good, and I think it's allow many organizations to set up a region. It has become one of the hubs.
Actually, according to the 2023 Crypto Oasis Ecosystem Report, there are already more than 1,800 organizations employing 8,650 people across the digital and the asset industry in the Middle East and North Africa. So it's very, very impressive. And from a practical perspective, do you feel that the environment to run a crypto business there, for example, from Dubai, is predictable and safe? Or there are still room for improvement?
I think a lot of things still need to evolve from the point of view that digital asset projects can be run from this region. You can do things like OTC trading. There's been some centralized exchanges like Binance that have recently been given the necessary licenses. ADGM, several of them as well, custodial licenses and many others. In Bahrain, there are several as well that have given licenses. So that means, yes, it's moving in the right direction, but that does not necessarily mean there are still a lot of things that need to be done. For example, today you can pay for hotel in Bahrain with digital assets. However, you can still not pay for a hotel with digital assets. For example, in UAE, they must be paid in dirham. Since you can have all digital assets, sell those digital assets, or pay them via Visa or MasterCard or through OTC, and then you can benefit from the usage of those, but not directly yet, as you can see, legal tech. So there's still a lot of room for improvement, but however, on the startup arena and as creating an ecosystem, and when we talk about creating an ecosystem, there's really three primary axes that are important, and I usually call these axes MBC, so money, and connections. So on one side, there's a lot of financial investment that has been made available for these startups to flourish. There's brains, which is a high concentration of human capital that can enable these projects to flourish, whether it is from the marketing side, smart contract application development side, auditing, and many others. And finally, connections. So being able to establish meaningful relations across the industry so that the projects can actually flourish, not just in the Middle East, but outside the Middle East.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Do you see investments for startups moving outside the UAE, maybe because of MiCA, where it's more difficult for startups to get off the ground because of some regulation costs that might exist, or like MiCA? Do you see more startup investments coming outside of the EU because of this?
We might have lost you, George. Let's hope you get back soon, because it's a very interesting question. Meanwhile, how is the case in Switzerland, and also answering Jeff's question here?
Yeah, I think the connection is back here. I'm sorry we had here a breakdown of the connection. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, nice, good.
Wonderful. To answer to Jeff's question, or do you want to
questions which you heard so far. So let's start with Jeff's question.
If we see more money going out of the EU at the moment in projects to the Middle East, for sure here in Switzerland, we have a lot of companies moving from Switzerland to the Middle East, especially to Dubai with the new regulations, because the help is different, the support is different, and the environment is different.
Even though Switzerland was one of the pioneers there in the industry.
Environment known at this time, and it was a wonderful place to be. I mean, everybody was here, and the problems or the challenges we had back in that time was that we simply were not able to open up bank accounts, which we had to have in order to operate our business. So it was very difficult. The environment was ruled by 2-3 banks who opened up their doors and were supportive for these kind of companies. And so it became more, or the feeling was here around that the business case was to make money with the due diligence for these companies. So that it was not really a big interest to open up accounts. So one of the standard answers at that time was like, the regulation is unclear. We don't know in what we are entering here. We don't have stability in the regulation. And now as MiCA came around the corner, the things changed. And now you can see in many banks in Switzerland, especially in Zug, the Zuger Kantonalbank, which is a state-controlled environment, is promoting and having even advertising on bus and public spaces with Bitcoin on it, which was impossible a few years ago. But as that happened, a lot of the smaller companies, which were denied back in the days, thought, okay, if that's the case now, and the banks are doing the business here, then it's going to be very difficult. And at the same time, everybody starts to receive letters from the Financial Market Authorization, FINMA, asking again about information, the business, things you thought you are over it and you can concentrate on building the business. But actually, it started all over again. And we see here, especially where we have our offices in the midst of the city, where we were in this house, 18 companies working and operating in digital asset environments. And crypto, if you so want. Today we are 3, and the other 50 are in the crypto oasis, which is in Dubai.
That's a very significant direction and movement. Do you
Definitely.
think it would, the MiCA would have a similar effect as well? So have you seen that certain companies started to move from Switzerland to EU or contemplating doing so?
Not to the EU. I mean, MiCA is a very interesting setup. It goes in detail, but in many points there is so much room for interpretation, which makes it difficult to understand at its full extent what that means in certain cases. So we think that it will take some time to harmonize the regulation all over EU states, because if you go to places like Portugal or you go to Greece or to Italy, there are completely different understandings of MiCA and the interpretation of it. And often it has to do that MiCA comes into game where they already have data protection and privacy rules and regulations. And these two groups of law, or these different law structures, are not harmonized today. So it becomes very, very difficult. There's things in MiCA where you request to hold records. On the other side, you have the EU-Italian regulation or the new AI regulation, which does not allow you to hold this way. So just as one example. And then you are standing as an operator, you're operating your servers, and you ask now, okay, what is less painful penalty I'm facing? I mean, that's basically the question you're asking yourself by setting up new structures or new services. And I think it will take 2-3 years till we are really at that point that we are all can say now we are profiting from the new MiCA regulation.
That's actually a really great example, because we get stuck into the middle of the collision, what you just mentioned, because it happened several times in our practice that yes, the loads unfortunately collide. So one states something, but it's not possible to comply with that because the other one says something completely different. And then we go to the financial authority, ask for clarification. They send us to the data protection authority. The data protection authority sends us back to the financial authority. And in the end, the suggestion from all the authorities for us is to, yeah, please go to the ministry and do something with the law. Well, thank you. That's a great and useful outcome of a case, but that's very much so. And Eric, as to one of the lab rats here, how you actually can comply with the MiCA when exactly this is basically now a comprehensive framework, but the practical more details are right now in the making as well, with all kind of consultations and papers and so on within the EU. How do you handle that?
Yes. So first, I just want to double click on what Milivoje just mentioned regarding what happened in Crypto Valley back then. So what we have been seeing in Sweden is that our regulations has not necessarily been much worse than in other countries, but the problem has more been the sentiment amongst like the financial institutions, like both the financial authority, the central bank, and commercial banks. And this has made it, in short, like very hard to get bank accounts. And that really stifles innovation. It's really hard to operate a crypto company in Sweden. And so that is one point. And just to take an example that we in the industry here have been somewhat laughing about. So last week, our financial authority, they published an article named 4 Reasons Not to Buy Crypto. And the arguments are what you would expect. It's the same arguments that we've been hearing for the past 10 years. So they're either like solved problems or very misleading. And what's a bit worrying, like this is a Swedish specific problem, but that one person quoted in the article is also responsible for implementing MiCA in Sweden. So this has been the backdrop here locally, and a lot of companies has been leaving Sweden, and basically everyone who's still here has some kind of thought about it. But we see that MiCA will improve it on both ends, so both on the regulatory clarity side and also on the sentiment side, because MiCA gives credibility to the industry, and hopefully, also as Milivoje mentioned, that what the banks are worried about is the regulatory clarity part. And if that's the case, maybe we as crypto companies can onboard them or become customers of these banks. I think that's like my main worry about MiCA is that the sentiment part will not improve. But as an optimist, I still think it will. So yeah.
Yeah, it's actually been long anticipated because that's always, and there we find ourselves in the middle of the chaos as well, being lawyers, that if there is regulation, then that's the problem. If there is no regulation, that's the problem. So it's a bit hard to satisfy everyone all the time in that sense. But I also agree that we have nothing else but being optimistic, right, with the developments in the EU.
Definitely.
And what do you guys think about as to the needs for minimal obstacles when operating a crypto business? And how does your country deliver there? What would be the key points which you would recommend others to take into consideration when changing or choosing a country of operation?
I can just quickly mention, it depends on what you want to do. Like as someone mentioned before here on the panel, is that MiCA does not provide clarity for some type of crypto or Web3 businesses. But for an exchange like ours or a broker, it's very clearly defined. So for us, it's quite simple, and MiCA is what we have been waiting for to some regard. But if you want to NFT gaming and you want to issue 100 swords on the blockchain in your new strategy game, it becomes more unclear and how to operate it. And maybe someone else on the panel can answer on where you should locate if you do projects like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Millie?
Yeah, correctly. I can just agree with Eric's statement. And what I think is one of the key points that the authorities, let's call them like this, who are implementing MiCA everywhere, should have officers that are fast and quick responding with clear answers. I think that will be a good start. If I, as a company, have an idea or have to react to a certain new circumstance, I cannot put this specific part of my business on hold for 3 months until these 4 people regulating a 20 million person market have time to respond to me. So this waiting time makes it as well very difficult. And with this waiting time as well, a clean, fast implementation of the MiCA rules. This is something which I see is a huge obstacle we have at the moment, the waiting time for clear responses. Just to give you an example, like we have a major law office here in Zug. They're famous. I can't name the name; it will not be good. But they advised based on information they have received several projects to do it the green way, for example. And behind the scenes, there were already there was a case ongoing, and it was decided that the purple way is the correct way. So in this time where they successfully implemented 2 projects, there was this change, and then there was no feedback from the authorities that there were a change, a clean change. It was just published somewhere. It was not officially announced, and which led to the point that about several projects being sued after, or at the moment, in legal cases involved with the government for doing wrong. And if there will be a shorter ways to talk to these people, that will be really, really helpful for a harmonization of the market and a faster implementation. That was one point. And the other point I see definitely is every time when new regulations are created, they say, oh, we are talking with expert groups, we are sitting together, we are sitting to people from the front line of the digital asset and crypto business. But when you look who is actually sitting there, working on the top table, with the regulators or with the ladies and gentlemen who provide then the regulation, it's not the people who are in the front line operating in the market and have to day-to-day business. It's people who are as well a little bit above, like the top four, I don't know, Pricewaterhouse or EY, etc., sitting there and giving their opinions, or crypto associations where people leading in the crypto associations are operating on their other levels, if I can say it so, and do not really have the heat of the market. So to understand what do I really need that will help me to be fast in the market. You know, Jeff brought this up in the beginning of this conversation and said, you know, people staying on the fence and staying on the side and waiting till something is happening to be sure which way to go. So these are the main points I see at the moment as an obstacle in this whole regulation. Sorry for the long speech.
Oh, it's absolutely okay. And Jeff, really.
Yeah, I wanted to add. You know, you mentioned what do we need for minimal obstacles? I mean, I think number one is clear guidelines, and as Millie said, we need easily accessibility to those, you know, enforcing the rules, so it's clear, you know, when we need to make decisions, what they are. The way Cryptio is thinking about this is needing the support for operationally. You know, every company needs a ledger of truth. They need to maintain all the different metadata flowing throughout their company, and likely for many years. And this is going to be, you know, throughout all the EUs. So, you know, every company will need to figure out just the policies, procedures to support MiCA and the data that supports the regulations. So, you know, what we're thinking about daily is how we can help automate that burden on companies. And the way we think about it is like categorization or clustering of the different assets to clearly, you know, chop up how MiCA views the different type of assets. And with that, just understanding every transaction through a ledger source of truth and understanding the overall needs for compliance and reporting perspective. And that becomes easier, you know, once you do have something in place, and it doesn't need to be Cryptio, but it needs to be some kind of a technology, in my opinion, just to maintain all the data and categorizing that data so you could streamline your operations and solutions. So, you know, your regulatory compliance reporting needs, the time gets cut down to do that type of reporting, the feedback, and any kind of onboarding burden. So, you know, it starts with the ledger of truth, proper tools, and just identifying and splitting up the metadata in order to really support what MiCA is going to require.
And how does the SEC affect your work actually there? Because what we see from the EU sometimes that it gives the impression of like random attacks, like sometimes it strikes like an ego to certain companies. If we consider now Binance, so they agreed to pay in November 23 a $4 billion settlement with the states because they admitted that they get engaged in anti-money laundering and unlicensed money transmitting, and that was one of the biggest corporate fines in U.S. history. So how do you consider the SEC from inside?
I can just see businesses from MiCA, because I believe if you're a EU company and you're interacting with a U.S. company, now that U.S. company needs to comply. I could just see maybe people doing less business or with U.S. companies or in general, and just fear that, they'll now be under the U.S. microscope. I don't want to feel that way. It's just the reality, and these massive fines, which scare the hell out of any company, let alone, a company the size of Binance, which you said is the largest fine. So I think the SEC just scares a lot of companies, and that's just my opinion. But and it's because there's no real guidance. I mean, that's what MiCA is trying to do. It's trying to provide clear guidance so companies fully understand what's what. If the SEC clearly defines what's a security, instead of just saying, based on a test 70 years ago, we decided, the Howey rule is the rule of law to decide that it's security. And then we have the CFTC coming out in court cases also saying that, the same securities, the same tokens that the SEC has deemed a security are actually commodities. So at the same time, we see some conflicting type of feedback from, the different regulators in the U.S. government, fighting over what's a security, what's a commodity, and who owns it and who has authority over it. So we have to come a long way in the U.S. And we need to just start providing clarity instead of just clouding up the waters and, enforcing or regulating through enforcement.
Yeah, there are actually voices, how you also mentioned earlier, against the U.S. policymakers and certain SEC commissioners as well. For example, Hester Pierce, who called the MiCA a good starting point that could work as a model for the U.S. as well. So that's going to be interesting in that sense that this suggests towards the EU has actually made a good bet here. But I think there is another angle which we'll talk about a little bit, is the reverse solicitation of MiCA. And it's very important to understand that the reverse solicitation, so it means that you can allow and provide services when initiated by the client without prior solicitation from your end if you don't own a MiCA license, for example, so from third countries. But it's very important to understand that it's not sufficient basis for cross-border businesses in the EU, because the MiCA interprets the solicitation very, very broadly, like encompassing various forms of marketing, online banners, TV ads, brand partnerships, influencers, for example. And it's also regardless who actually conducts the solicitation. So if someone promotes your services to EU residents, it's still considered solicitation by you. And other than that, the duration is also limited. So your firm cannot continue offering services extensively, even though in an occasional basis, it still can be allowed without being licensed under MiCA. What do you think about that approach, guys?
Can you rephrase the question? Sorry.
Yeah, so as to the reverse solicitation, that third country firms offering crypto services doesn't need a license. That's the common belief, because if it's the client itself who initiates to use your services, then you don't need a MiCA license within the EU, even though the client is in the EU. But it's not actually true, because the MiCA interprets this solicitation very broadly and very, very limited. So you being in Switzerland, for example, what have you seen what the people or like the businesses take about this type of solicitation towards EU clients?
No, we didn't. I didn't make this experience so far because based on the nature of our business, we are not really in the financial part of. Yes, we are operating a digital wallet and providing the software, the service for it, but we did not face it. Basically, I think the right approach is not be too fearful about MiCA and what MiCA brings at the moment. Even they go up behind the big cases, right? If something is really doing something constantly wrong in a way where he endangers thousands of people, their investment, then they're coming. I think that there is, or my experience was that they are leaving you quite alone till you find your way to operate in the market. At least in Switzerland, I mean, we never had, or I can only talk about our company, not about others. We never had any correction or any letters saying us, oh, you can do or cannot do based on regulation. And as well, I don't, I mean, in first line, as long as we are operating in Switzerland, we are not responsible to MiCA. We don't even need to answer to that, but we are offering as well service in the European Union. And I don't know how they're going to be handling that or what will come around. What is for sure, if they have you as a target for whatever reason, and that's a little bit my worry in the future, is that if you, let's say you are in a way active or publicly active that doesn't fit in a narrative they like, which we can see with this all censoring and communication laws or fake news, whatever they are calling it now, that MiCA could be used to silence companies' platforms like Telegram or OneGate, you know, because it's much harder to come from the free speech side and say, okay, let's look how they're operating in the digital environment for digital assets. And it would be easier due to the fact that it is not so defined in detail what each position means, that they can come around the corner and use MiCA to silence you on this way. This is more my worry than specific themes in the whole MiCA regulation that they could create problems for us.
And how about the US?
Pardon me?
How about the US? I was wondering about Jeff's take.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, just high level. My take on what again?
On the reverse solicitation of MiCA.
And that's if you're just doing business with a company in Europe, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this briefly before, is that I think it's going to stop companies, I think specifically in Europe, to do business in the U.S. or if companies are crossing the border. I think it'll just limit that global type of interactions that we would expect in this space, at least until regulations lift a little bit. I mean, I need to read more into, honestly, the reverse solicitations and what would be required of a U.S. company. But I would imagine that based on some of the harsh actions that the U.S. has taken, it will limit that global operational interactions with companies in the EU or in the U.S. in general.
I guess one of the takes there of the EU is to actually try to get as much crypto businesses that as possible. That we will see whether it works or not. And I would like to close with a quick lightning round here, if technology allows, as to and then please just answer with a quick yes and no or one word. Would you recommend your country to found and operate a crypto business in? Eric?
No.
Jeff?
No.
Switzerland? Millie?
No.
Oh, interesting. Do we have Dubai? Because it would be really great to hear them. Yeah, okay. Then the next question. If you were starting your
Yes.
are you here?
Dubai not yet. Dubai not yet.
Not yet. Okay. And then this leads me to the next question. And we get 4 no's here. Interesting. That which country would you choose for your company if you are starting your business today with the same profile? Eric?
Lithuania or France?
Jeff?
I have a lot of opinions here. I think Singapore's great. I think Luxembourg's great. I think a lot of South America is really great too to start and support crypto. And a lot of the islands like the Caymans, etc.
Mm-hmm. George?
Definitely Bahrain or Dubai for startups and ecosystem. For Asia, definitely Singapore.
So 2 for Singapore then. And Millie?
For the data protection and privacy, I will definitely do Switzerland. For the crypto space, I find now Madeira, Portugal, very interesting and has a very good framework, and El Salvador or Singapore is on the other side my favorite.
This is very interesting. We can do the next panel with these countries who you now brought up. Have you considered moving your business to another country since it came into force? Eric?
Yes.
Jeff?
I would say no. I mean, we're a different type of model, but we do work with a lot of, we work with companies globally. And I would say there's conversations daily that we hear about of people trying to leave the U.S. or at least have a backup plan. So it's constantly a conversation, at least in the U.S. right now in the current environment.
Thank you. Millie?
We are splitting up already. We're splitting, having the social environment in Switzerland for data protection and privacy, as I already said. We are evaluating and preparing for the digital asset environment and our own coin, Gatecoin, in Madeira. And we have as well an operational office in Hungary to be able to provide certain services from there. So we're splitting up. We're not centralizing anymore.
Interesting. And George?
Definitely, I would keep Dubai and Bahrain for the winter, and probably Switzerland or Singapore, maybe even Switzerland or Singapore for the summer.
Very interesting. And the last question is whether you guys think has the EU made the right bet here with MiCA? Eric?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Has the EU made the right bet here with MiCA?
Kinda, I would say. It's very good with the clarity, but as Jeff spoke about earlier, is that it's not great for bottom-up innovation, and I think they could have done better on that point.
Jeff?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think short term it'll hurt. I think medium, especially long term, it'll be good. And I think it's setting the right precedent. But I think there needs to be maybe some flexibilities, like Eric said, with bringing in innovation and startup companies that really can handle regulatory, intense regulatory requirements.
Thank you. Millie?
I'm not sure at this moment. What definitely brings trust back to the industry. It was we went through a valley where when you even mention blockchain or crypto, people start walking away, and MiCA is bringing some certainty to us, at least for the image of the business. From the practical side, I think that the EU has loaded an elephant, which they are still not able to handle. There is a missing of competence centers, fast reaction, precedences in special cases and jurisdictional handling in that. And as an overall harmonization over 27 countries applying these rules, I think it will take years till it is on the level that everybody feels well operating in Europe under this regulation. At this point of time today, I will say they should have first worked more on it before pushing so hard, so fast to the market. At the moment, they're hurting the industry more than they're helping the industry.
Thank you. And George, as to Dubai, from Dubai, what do you think? Has the EU made the right bet?
I think Dubai is still evolving and still learning. I think there's been quite a lot of changes. And I think it's steps in the right direction, and definitely they have been focusing on startups, ecosystem, taxation, and so on, and that has given them an advantage for the relocation of many companies. I think MiCA probably came down a bit harder in many areas, so it can stifle a bit on the startups. But in the long run, I think it's good for everybody to step in the right direction.
Thank you. It's going to be really exciting to see, especially taking all of your insights from a practical perspective. And we got a question here about the company in Hungary. So can you please repeat what you said about that? Because someone is wondering. I assume it's related to the operations there.
This is the question, Nami, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Exactly.
I'd like to ask about what you mentioned, really, company in Hungary. I don't understand the question. You want to hear what we said about or what we do in Hungary?
I think you can cover both shortly because we are in.
We are splitting our operations to Hungary to have a European Union. Even Hungary has their political issues like every other country. We feel very safe because in the near of Sopron you have their technical innovations handling. You have good educated people supporting digital environments. And this is giving us a good environment to be active into. And that's why
you
we
are
split.
basically using it as the bridge to the
We
EU.
are between all these parts. I mean, for us, it will be impossible that the added value I have in Switzerland with data protection is not supporting our efforts to raise and grow from the digital asset side, and on the other side, from the digital asset side, doing that out of Sopron with this high taxation is not working. So what we do is we're standing in every country a little bit, splitting the nature of operations and building up and mixing that all together, but with different service providers, legal entities, of course.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you very much, guys, for the lot of very useful insights. It was very interesting to hear it from within. And thank you very much for the audience as well and the question as well which came. And looking forward to see you in the future as well in one of our events. Now you know the event space. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Carola. And thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you very much for having me.